Welcome to HP Device Manager 5.0 Migrating and Upgrading HP Device Manager 4.7 tutorial. As a disclaimer, this tutorial makes the following assumptions: that a legacy Windows Server 2003 or 2008 is set up, configured, and introduced into your environment, and that HP Device Manager 4.7 is set up and configured on the legacy Windows Server, and that finally a new Windows Server 2012 or 2016 is set up, configured, and introduced into your environment. As part of the tutorial, we will be covering the following: downloading HP Device Manager 5.0 .executable on both legacy and new Windows Server, executing the HP Device Manager 5.0 executable on legacy Windows Server, reviewing complete setup and or destination folder on legacy Windows Server, reviewing pop-up dialog indicating uninstallation and backup on HPDM 4.7 legacy Windows Server, collecting legacy Windows Server HPDM 4.7 backup at the following directory, collecting legacy Windows Server HPDM 4.7 master repository at the following directory, moving the legacy Windows Server HPDM 4.7 backup and repository to the new Windows Server, creating the restore registry edit file on new Windows Server, executing HP Device Manager 5.0 .executable on new Windows Server, reviewing complete setup and or destination folder on new Windows Server, restoring legacy HPDM 4.7 Windows Server backup on new Windows Server, checking preconditions and or mitigating on new Windows Server, allowing all 7 components to install and reviewing the admin guide on the new Windows Server, launching HPDM 5.0 console on the new Windows Server, and then finally confirming the restore on new Windows Server. As a couple of notes, if Microsoft SQL Server is being used, reconfiguration of the login account and password will be necessary. And also when moving the master repository to the new server, reconfiguration of the repository settings will be necessary. Let's begin. Starting with the legacy server environment, I have already downloaded HPDM 5.0 executable and placed that on my desktop. There are 3 steps that we need to complete on our legacy server environment, which happens to be running Windows Server 2008 R2 standard. Keep in mind that in order to be compliant for HP Device Manager 5.0, your environment must be Server 2012 or higher. For step 1, we are going to go ahead and execute our HPDM 5.0 executable on our desktop by double-clicking on the shortcut. We will then click Run at the UAC. And now we'll confirm the save file location. This is the default location at c:/swsetup /HP Device Manager 5.0. If we wish to change that, we can go ahead and click Change. For now, we're going to go ahead and click Next. And it will then extract the files to that location. Once the extraction is complete, we will get greeted with a pop-up saying setup cannot continue because the following software installations were detected. It will list HP Device Manager 4.7 and the respective service pack that you have installed. In this case, it's Service Pack 12. It will also list HP Device Manager Embedded HTTPS Server. And then it will go on to explain the software configuration and management database have been archived and will be safely restored during the installation of HP Device Manager 5.0. Please uninstall the software components identified above from the system before continuing with this installation. We're going to go ahead and click OK. And now, as part of step 2, we're going to go ahead and click on the File Explorer icon here in the taskbar, and then click on Computer, and then double-click on the C drive. The backup that pop-up identified is placed at SW Setup underneath the C drive. I'm going to go ahead and right-click it, choose Copy, and paste this to my desktop. You have the option of pasting this wherever is necessary. I am then going to collect, in the same way, the init pub directory. If you're familiar with HP Device Manager 4.7, init pub directory is where it places the contents of the master repository. So I'm going to go ahead and right-click that, choose Copy, and paste this to my desktop. Now that we have collected both the backup and the master repository contents, That will complete step 2 of the process, and now we'll move on to step 3, which is we're going to migrate these 2 files to our new server environment. This is our new server environment running server standard 2016. I have went ahead and placed those 2 files on the desktop. I've also downloaded a copy of HP Device Manager 5.0 executable and placed that on the desktop. And I've also added a restore registry file to the desktop. The contents of this registry file are in the admin guide. And just to show you the contents, I'm going to right click it and choose edit. And you will notice that it is simply changing and adding a registry entry for allowing us to restore the backup that we collected from our legacy environment. The new install will also include 3 steps. We will begin by copying both of our files from our legacy environment into the same identical locations on this new server. I'm going to go ahead and click on the File Explorer in the taskbar, and then this PC, and then double click on the C drive. Then I'm going to go ahead and highlight both files and drag them into the C drive. Now that they're sitting on the C drive, as a secondary step, I will go ahead and double click on the restore registry file. I will then get a pop-up saying adding information can unintentionally change or delete values and cause components to stop working correctly. If you do not trust the source of this information, listing out our file, do not add it to the registry. Are you sure you want to continue? We're going to go ahead and click yes. And then we're going to get another pop-up that says the keys and values contained in that file have been successfully added to the registry. And now we're going to go ahead and click OK. That completes step 2. Now, as the final step for step 3, we're going to go ahead and launch the HP Device Manager 5.0 executable. I'm going to go ahead and double click on the shortcut. And now I'm going to go ahead and click Run at the UAC. It's going to point out the save file folder location. Just as before, it is C:\/SW setup / HP Device Manager 5.0. If I wanted to change that, I could go ahead and click Change. I'm going to go ahead and click Next and wait for it to extract the file contents. Once the extraction is complete, I'm going to get a pop-up that says this software configuration and management database of a previous installation have been detected. Click Restore to safely restore the data during the installation of HP Device Manager 5.0, or click Skip to perform a clean installation. Since we are using our backup, we're going to go ahead and click Restore. And now we're going to get greeted with the Welcome to Install Wizard for HP Device Manager 5.0, and we're going to go ahead and click Next. As part of step 1, we're going to review the license agreement from top to bottom. Once we've reviewed the license agreement from top to bottom, we're going to go ahead and click the checkbox for I accept the terms of the license agreement and click Next. For step 2, we're going to select our setup type. For the purposes of this tutorial, we're going to go with the complete installation, but just to show you the 7 individual components, I'm going to bubble in custom and then click Next. This will show you the individual 7 components of HP Device Manager 5.0, their installation size, and their packaged versions. I'm going to go ahead and click Back, bubble in complete, and now verify the destination folder for where I want those 7 components to be. If I wish to change them, I'll go ahead and click Browse. For now, I'm going to go ahead and click Next. For step 3, it's going to check the preconditions. I'm going to go ahead and click Check. It will list all the individual ports necessary for HP Device Manager 5.0 to function. And as I scroll down to the very bottom, it will also list the precondition for space for each of those 7 components. You should see green check marks from top to bottom. If you see red marks, this will be your opportunity to mitigate or reconcile where necessary. Once you see green check marks from top to bottom, you'll go ahead and click Install and move on to step 4, which is installing these 7 components. I'm going to go ahead and click Install. While it's installing the individual 7 components, we're going to go ahead and review the admin guide. Starting with page 12, which is the installation, we're going to review the individual components. all 7 of HP Device Manager 5.0. Beginning on page 12, it's going to begin listing those 7 components, and it's going to list the individual requirements, noting here that once again, you must have Server 2012 or newer to install HP Device Manager 5.0. It will also list out the respective memory sizes and disk spaces. Please take into consideration what you hope to accomplish with HP Device Manager 5.0 and the individual file save sizes that you are needing for your payloads. Scrolling on page past page 12 onto page 14, where it ends. You will notice the product support matrix where it will list the individual thin clients that are supported for HP Device Manager 5.0. Scrolling past page 14 on page 15, it will list the Windows firewall settings. The general ports that HP Device Manager 5.0 will require to be running is the range of ports 40,000 to 40,009 and also ports 40,012. There are additional ports necessary for HPDM to function properly. Those will be identified further down in this admin guide. Scrolling past page 15, looking on page 16, it's going to list out the individual commands for your advanced firewall that you need to use to open up those individual ports. Scrolling past page 16 and onto page 17, it's going to identify the individual setups. In prior tutorials, we took you through the complete setup on page 17. And also the upgrading and existing installation on page 22. This particular tutorial will be covering migrating HP Device Manager 4.7 data to a new machine and upgrading. Scrolling past page 23 will outline the steps that we are covering today in this tutorial, as well as some snapshots. It will also show you the registry key that I used or will be using. Scrolling past all the way to page 29, it's going to list 2 topologies. The top topology will be a standard topology. The bottom topology will be a more advanced topology. Starting with the topology up at the top, all 7 components are going to be installed in the same piece of hardware or virtual machine. And looking at the bottom, all individual components will be broken out into individual pieces of hardware or virtual machines. Utilizing the lower topology, I'm going to go ahead and explain the flow of how a deployment request will work. An admin will use the web browser or the software console to create a deployment request. That deployment request will then get sent to the HPDM server component. It will then use the database, either Postgres or Microsoft SQL, for its logical data. It will then request the payload from the master repository component and the child repository components if present. It will then use the HPDM gateway component to go ahead and send out that deployment request to your individual thin clients. And now we're going to go ahead and check on our installation. As you notice here, the installation was a success. If we needed to reconfigure our Microsoft SQL Server, we would go ahead and check mark the Launch HPDM Configuration Center checkbox and continue on there. Since we're using Postgres for the default installation, I'm going to go ahead and click Finish. And I'm going to give it just a few moments to go ahead and complete the setup. If you notice here on the desktop, there is an HP Device Manager console icon and shortcut. I'm going to go ahead and double click that to go ahead and launch HP Device Manager 5.0. And now I'm going to use the login and password from my prior environment. Once I'm logged in, it's going to show me the splash screen and eventually drop me at the home dashboard. This is the home dashboard that will show 6 individual tiles for the 6 individual features of HP Device Manager 5.0. Just to verify that our restore was successful, I'm going to go ahead and start with clicking Manage Devices tab. Looking at the individual OS dropdown, you're going to notice the OSs that match your environment. In my particular case, I have Win10 IoT and ThinPro. As I click on each of these individual OSs, and if I leave the group to the default dynamic group for the gateway and click on it, you will notice that it will list the individual thin clients as part of that OS and group. In the same way, if I were to go ahead and click on HP ThinPro 7 and leave the default dynamic group and then click on the gateway, you will also notice the respective thin clients there as well. So we know that that took effect properly. Now to confirm our repository, we're going to go ahead and check on Gateways and Repositories tab and click on that. Off to the side menu, we're going to go ahead and click on Repositories. If I left click on the master repository, it will change blue, and now I can go ahead and right click and choose Edit. From here, I will want to change the server address to the new server address, and then I will need to take the opportunity to click on Protocols, reselect my protocols if they weren't restored, and then set the individual settings for each protocol here. I will also want to go ahead and check on users and groups. So I'm going to go ahead and click on users and groups and confirm that all my users are present and all my groups are present by clicking on the menu and verifying the groups. Since I didn't add any additional groups or users, I have the standard groups and the standard user of root. As part of this tutorial, we demonstrated the following: backup of the legacy server and restore and upgrade of the new server. I would also like to invite you to our webinars every Tuesday and Thursday at the following links. This concludes our tutorial.